We stand at a moment where history, divinity, and human experience converge. Genesis 21, verses 22 through 24, recounts what may seem at first glance a simple encounter between Abraham and the king of Gerar, Abimelech, along with his commander Phicol. Yet, as we move into the depths of this passage, we discover layers that extend across time, language, culture, spirituality, and psychology. Abraham, a man who has walked decades of trial, promise, and covenant, now stands in a desert that is simultaneously harsh and sacred. Isaac has been born, a living testament to the faithfulness of God's word. Hagar and Ishmael have been sent into the wilderness, their story marked by God's tender care and the shaping of destinies. Into this narrative steps Abimelech, a king who carries the weight of political authority, and Phicol, his military commander, who embodies structured power. They approach Abraham not as conquerors, not as oppressors, but as witnesses to a presence they cannot fully comprehend. They see in Abraham not only a man but a reflection of the divine favor that orchestrates events beyond human calculation. Their approach is both caution and recognition. They have heard of Abraham's integrity, have witnessed his faithfulness, and have sensed that divine accompaniment flows through his life. This is an encounter where human authority bends before divine blessing, and we are invited to enter into its depths. If you are a beginner, imagine the psychological weight of this moment. You have traveled through fear, deception, and uncertainty. You have known the vulnerability of being a stranger, the anxiety of dependence, and the tension of maintaining truth in hostile territory. Yet in all of this, you have heard a voice, a word that calls to you from beyond the immediate moment. Suddenly, those who hold influence and power in your environment approach you. They acknowledge your life, your actions, and they see something greater at work. This is a lesson in the fruitfulness of fidelity, the peace that accompanies integrity, and the influence of a life guided by divine presence. Even your adversaries are compelled to recognize the blessing upon you, illustrating that God's favor has both internal and external impact. Even in worldly affairs, divine presence manifests as recognition, respect, and relational alignment. Turning to the Hebrew, verse 22 opens with Wai-hi bat ha-hi. Wai-hi, the Wai-ktol form, is a narrative consecutive tense, signaling that the events unfold sequentially yet under divine orchestration. The narrative is moving forward, yet each step carries weight beyond chronology. Bat ha-hi, at that time, denotes not merely a temporal setting but a kairos, a moment appointed by God's sovereignty. The Masoretic cantillation introduces a pashta followed by a zakef katan, which creates a pause, a musical breath, guiding the listener to sense transition from domestic life to political and spiritual engagement. This is not incidental. The text itself teaches us to attend, to pause, and to recognize divine timing. The narrative continues with Vayoma Avimelech u Phicol sa sevo el Avraham limor. Abimelech, a name denoting paternal kingship, carries the weight of dynastic and societal authority. Phicol, whose etymology suggests the voice or mouth of all, represents military structure, the enforcement of law and security. Their combined presence reflects the holistic power of their nation, the crown, representing governance, and the sword, representing enforcement. Yet they do not approach with hostility. Their approach conveys recognition of moral and spiritual authority, an acknowledgement that Abraham operates under a favor and blessing beyond their comprehension. Elohim Ameka Bekol Asher Ata Oseh, God is with you in all that you do, is the heart of the message. Elohim speaks to universal power, Ameka, the intimate accompaniment, and Oseh, the Kal participle, indicating habitual, continuous action. Here the Hebrew communicates not a one-time blessing but a life consistently aligned with God, a living testimony of divine favor. Verse 23 introduces Hishava, the Hipil imperative, to swear. The root Shin Bet Ayin, linked to the number 7, symbolizes completeness, perfection, and covenantal witness. Abimelech requests that Abraham not deal falsely, Tesheka, echoing the prior narrative where deception caused tension and near calamity. This is both legal and relational. Abimelech invokes chest, loyal love, the mercy and covenantal kindness that frames ethical relationships. Ancient Near Eastern law informs us here. In Nuzi texts and in Hammurabi codes, treaties required witnesses, oaths, and assurances of honesty. A riksu, a bond, followed preambles, historical prologues, and stipulations. Abimelech uses the full framework, blending political diplomacy with moral recognition. He is asking for trustworthiness because Abraham has become a power in the land, both materially and spiritually, and a stable covenant ensures peace for his people. Abraham responds in verse 24, Vyomer Avraham Anuki Ishava. Anuki, I am, places his entire identity into the covenantal moment. Ishava, nipple imperfect, reflects voluntary binding, surrendering autonomy for the sake of truth. This voluntary surrender is deeply spiritual, an internal alignment with God's justice and mercy. Abraham's consent demonstrates a secure attachment to God and a readiness to model integrity, even to those who might distrust him. In psychological terms, Abraham shows resilience, relational security, and the capacity to stabilize others through consistent ethical action. Abimelech's initial wariness softens in the presence of a life governed by divine favor. Polyvagal theory informs us here, safety and calmness are contagious. Abraham radiates regulated nervous system energy, inviting Abimelech and his people into relational security and peace. Historically, Beersheba, in the semi-arid Negev, is a landscape of scarcity and strategic significance. Water sources are lifelines. Abraham, as a ger, a foreigner, had no automatic legal rights. Ownership of wells represented survival, sovereignty, and political influence. Constructing a well required physical strength, planning, and protection against theft and evaporation. Each stone placed represented control over life-giving resources. By establishing this covenant, Abraham is formally incorporated into local society under divine auspices, transforming from refugee to recognized neighbor. The well itself becomes a symbol of divine provision and human responsibility. From the perspective of church fathers and mystics, this encounter resonates across centuries. Origen interprets Abraham as the rational soul united with God, radiating moral and spiritual presence into the world. Abimelech represents natural wisdom, curiosity, and desire for peace, seeing in Abraham the reflection of divine order. Jewish mystical tradition views Abraham as the Shekinah's vessel. The righteous, according to Targum Onkelos and the Zohar, embody divine glory, making the invisible visible. Gregory Palamas teaches the distinction between God's essence and energies. While Abimelech cannot see God's essence, he witnesses the uncreated energies flowing through Abraham's actions. Augustine emphasizes chest as the shadow of Christ's grace, prefiguring divine mercy. Aquinas views Abraham's oath as both ethical and religious. Reformers like Calvin note the operation of common grace, allowing divine blessing to influence secular authority. Psychologically, this passage offers a profound meditation on trauma and healing. Abimelech, having experienced near harm in prior encounters with Abraham, represents the hypervigilant inner child, seeking safety and reassurance. Abraham, secure in divine love, models boundary integrity and trustworthy engagement. This is relational regulation in practice. Affirmations that arise from this passage include, God is with me in all that I do. My integrity radiates peace and draws others into alignment with the good. I can establish boundaries without fear. My past mistakes do not limit my present favor. I am moving from survival to sovereign flourishing. Meditative reflection invites us to inhabit Abraham's perspective, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the sustaining presence of God. Typologically, Abraham prefigures Christ. The covenant at Beersheba mirrors the new covenant established by Jesus. The well becomes a living water source, a foreshadowing of Christ's offer to all who thirst. Anuki Ishava resonates with Christ's obedience in Gethsemane, submitting willingly to the Father's will. Every element, covenant, oath, recognition, water, points forward to the fullness of God's salvific plan. Christ embodies the ultimate yes, binding humanity into God's eternal family. The nations are drawn to him, as Abimelech was drawn to Abraham. The desert setting itself becomes a sacred laboratory for divine human interaction, a place where trials, obedience, and faith manifest visibly in relational and cosmic order. We can extend meditation further. Imagine standing beside Abraham as the king and commander approach. Feel the heat of the Negev, the stones of the well, the scent of livestock, the tension of potential conflict, and the peace radiating from one fully aligned with God. Hear each word, each pause, and allow it to reverberate in the mind and heart. The covenant invites us to examine our own lives. Where are we called to integrity, to honesty, to relational healing, to peace that transcends fear? Let the Spirit guide reflection on past deceptions, on the courage to be honest, on the call to act with moral and spiritual presence, on the ability to be a stabilizing, blessing-centered presence for others. The depth expands as we revisit linguistic layers. Wahi, the consecutive tense, signals divine orchestration, ensuring that every trial and blessing unfolds according to cosmic order. Hishava, the imperative to swear, resonates with ethical urgency and the sacred resonance of 7. The nipple imperfect models voluntary surrender to truth. The cantillation marks guide intonation and pacing, signaling where breath and reflection are needed. The Septuagint and Vulgate offer expanded insight, deepening awareness of God's accompaniment and covenant fidelity. Nuzi and Hammurabi law provide both historical and ethical grounding. Patristic exegesis illuminates theological implications. Psychological insight fosters relational safety. Christological typology transforms history into living, participatory experience. Abraham's journey, Abimelech's recognition, the covenant, the well, the oath, and the desert together form a multi-layered masterwork. Beginners learn fidelity and integrity. Advanced scholars gain lexical, syntactic, and patristic treasures. Every soul seeking inner healing sees relational modeling, secure attachment, and ethical courage. Disciples of Christ witness prefiguration of Jesus, the living water, and the covenantal yes. Let this passage saturate the mind, body, and soul. Let each breath carry awareness of divine presence. Let every action reflect chest, integrity, and divine accompaniment. Let your life become a well of living water, drawing others into God's light, stability, and love. May your heart and life radiate God's sustaining and transformative presence into all relationships, all decisions, and every moment of your journey, as Abraham's did in the Negev, under the gaze of the Eternal.